So we're doing the Chapter 7 test review today. We're going over specifically the questions that are going to be on your test tomorrow. Not only are we going over similar questions, but I'm also telling you specifically this type of question, you're going to see this many on your test tomorrow. So the number that you see in parentheses is how many questions you'll have that are like this one on your test. So you can see that the percent, proportion, and equation is a pretty decent chunk of your test. All right. It's going to carry about 20% of your overall grade. You have to know how to do this. Now, the good thing is most of you do. All right. We've been learning this for about 3 weeks now. I think everybody's pretty good with it. Here's my major complaint from the quiz yesterday. You're not writing your equal signs. You're not setting up a true equation because it does not have an equal sign. Stop with the X's, like, the lines showing your cross product. Stop with that. All I want is an equal sign. I understand what you're doing, but on the technical side of it, it's not truly a proportion without an equal sign. So show your work, plug in your numbers. I don't care which method you use. Let's go ahead and solve this one. Okay, so I prefer to use the percent proportion on this because the conversion is built into the formula. I don't have to convert anything at the end. Like I said before, though, you can use whatever method you want. I prefer proportion when I'm solving for percent. When I'm solving for A or B, I prefer the percent equation, okay? So I went A over B, 34 over 85, equals P over 100. That's a true proportion, okay, with the equal sign. Now I'm going to do my cross products. 3,400 equals 85P. Okay, now this is what I call my cross product equation. This is showing that I multiplied my cross products and set up a new equation. Now how do I solve for P? Divide by 85. Okay, and remember, this is a percentage. I know that P stands for percent, but you still need a percent sign, 40%. Who got it right? Okay, so we're off to a good start. Now, in the second section on your test, finding the percent of the number. What confuses people about this one is it says find percent, so they think they're solving for percent. And I agree the wording is a little goofy, but remember, the percentages in your original problem, you're finding 90% of 73. So essentially what it's asking you is what value is 90% of 73? Your answer is not a percentage. Okay? Go ahead and solve this one. So what do we have to do to a percent before we can multiply it? Change it to a decimal. 0.9 times 73, 65.7. Is this an answer that you round? No. No, it is not. Why? It's not repeating, and it terminates. If it's non-terminating, meaning it goes on and on and on, yes, you round it to the nearest whole number or to the nearest tenth. If it's money, you round it to the nearest penny, which is the hundredths place, okay? Or you could leave it a repeating decimal. There's flexibility there. There is not flexibility when you have a terminating decimal and you round it, okay? You will lose points for that. Do you understand the difference, okay? Decimal that keeps on going, yes, I will allow for the rounding, but not a terminating decimal. All right, moving on to the next section. In the next section, we're finding the new amount, okay? So it gives you an amount that you increase 520 by 30%. Go ahead and find the new amount. All right, so what is the first step? And we actually just did this in a previous slide, the first step at least. What is my first step? Change a percent to a decimal and multiply, okay? So we get 156. In the earlier section, that's where we ended. But that's not my final amount. That's not my new amount. What do I have to do now?
Add 520.
Yeah, I've got to add 156 plus 520 to get my final amount. Now, when would I subtract it? When would I subtract it? If it's a decrease, I need to subtract it. All right, so pretty easy stuff. We're almost halfway through the test so far. Okay, not too bad. All right, so now we need to look at a food bill. All right, if I have a food bill That's $20. My tip is 18% and my tax is 5%. I need to find the total amount of money that I spent. So if I show up to the restaurant with only $20 in my pocket, I can't purchase food that's $20 because I won't have enough money for my tip or my tax. So we always have to take all three factors into account when we're trying to figure out how much we can afford to spend. So two ways we can do this. The first way is we take the food amount and we multiply it by our tip and our tax. Okay? We have to figure out how much is my tip, how much is my tax. So what's 20 times 0.18? $3.60. What's 20 times 0.05? $1 even. So 20 plus $3.60 plus $1 gives me $24.60. That's my total. Another way that I can solve this, what does anybody think they know? What's another way I could solve this? Matthew?
You times 20 times 0.23.
Yeah, very good. So because I'm asking for the total, a percentage is a percentage, and I'm taking the percent from the same original number, and because of that, I can actually add my percentages together. Does everybody understand how I got 23% or 0.23? Okay. And then when I multiply that, I get $4.60. Well, is that the same thing as $3.60 plus $1? Yeah, it's the same thing. It's just one less step. Okay. So you definitely can do that. Now, here's where you can't do that. If the question were to ever ask you, what is the tip amount and what is the tax amount, and they were to leave it separate, then you would have to solve it the other way. But if it just says, what's the total, you could add your percentages together and then solve. All right, any questions on that? If that's confusing, just do it the first way.
Yeah, first way is way.
Okay, so that's the food bill. All right, now on the back of your test, we have new amount, new price, to find the new price, to find the original price. So let's go over those, okay? Finding the new price. This is when we're dealing with wholesale, original price, discount, markups, all right? And we're finding the new amount or the new price. The directions are going to be really important on these sections. When you're finding the new price, there's a way to solve it. When you're finding the original price, there's a way to solve it. This is a two-step process. Have you at least solved the first one?
Yes.
Okay. This is a two-step process. Your wholesale amount is $240. You must multiply that by the decimal value of your percentage. What's 240 times 0.8?
$192.
Okay, but that's not your final answer. I still have people stopping there and saying 192 is my answer. That's not. That's the amount that it was marked up. What do I need to do to find my retail price? Add it to 240, and I get $432. Okay? Now, there is another way to do it. Okay? There is another way to do it. Because you know it's marked up, what could you do to 80%?
Add 100%.
You could add it to 100% and change it to a decimal. And what would that be? 1.8. And you multiply 240 times 1.8 and do it in your calculator. What are you going to get?
432.
432. Now, here's the reason I don't teach it that way. Because when it comes to original price, you all seem to think you solve it the same way, but it's not. This is how you do it when you solve for new price. When you solve for original price, it has to be done, basically the original or the value they give you is plugged into a different part of the equation. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But yes, that is acceptable. If you do it that way on your test tomorrow, it's perfectly fine. Just make sure, please make sure you're plugging in the numbers in the correct location. On the second one, original price is $300. Discount is 25%. My recommendation is to take 300 and multiply it by 0.25. What do you get?
75.
You get 75. That's 25%. That's a pretty good sale. Okay? So what would my step 2 be?
Subtract 300.
Yep.
Subtract 75.
Yes, subtract it to get $225. What is the other way that I could do to solve for this problem?
Subtract 25 from 100.
Subtract 25 from 100, and what do you get?
75.
75, which is 0.75. What is 300 times 0.75? $225. Okay? You can totally solve it that way. Although it's not my recommended method, you can definitely solve it that way if you wish. All right, original price. This is where using the formula is not an option. It's not optional. And what you need to remember is you're finding original price. You're not finding new price. It's even underlined in the directions on your quiz and on your test. To find the original price, you must use a formula and you have to have it memorized. Go ahead and write it down and try to make your substitutions. All right, so retail price. What you need to understand is retail price is what you're paying. That's your final amount. That's your final price. Okay? So your formula is final amount equals original times 100. And why did I add 70? Why did I add 70?
Because that was the markup.
Because that's a markup. If it had been a discount, I would subtract 70. You cannot forget, and the reason I left the percentage signs off is because you guys are forgetting that this is a percentage that has to be converted to a decimal. So you're doing 170x instead of what's it supposed to be. This is a percentage, and what do you have to do to a percent before you can multiply it? Change it to a decimal. 170% is what as a decimal?
1.70.
It is 1.7. So the final price, which I know is 220. I still am seeing a lot of people trying to put 220 in for the original amount. It's not the original amount. That's what you're solving for. That's the final amount. Equals, all right, and I have original, which I'm going to say is x, times 1.7. Is there another way I could write that? 1.7x. And please write it that way. Just write it 1.7x. Okay? Does everybody understand where I got 1.7x from?
Yes.
Okay? So I take 100. Where did 100 come from? That's a part of your formula. That's there. It's set in stone. Then I add the percentage of the markup or subtract the discount. Then I change that. Does everybody agree that this is the same thing as 170%? You see that? You see that? Okay. So now 170% as a decimal is how I got 1.7. Do you see that now? Okay. So simplify what's in the parentheses. You get that percentage, but then you have to change it to a decimal before you can solve for x. All right, and now what do you do to solve for x? Divide both sides by 7, and
Whoa.
you get a repeating decimal, so you round to the nearest penny. The dollar ones are easy, just round to the nearest penny. Okay, I know it's repeating. That's okay, or non-terminating. That's okay.
ORG.
It is the original amount. You could say ORG.
So don't put X, put ORG.
All right, so that's original price. Now we need to talk interest. Finding simple interest and finding compound interest. With simple interest, there are two formulas. Say them with me. I equals PRT. When do I use that one?
Whenever it's interest.
When I'm solving for interest. If it says find the interest, I need to use that one. The other one, which is the more common one, is A equals P parentheses 1 plus the rate times time. And then you end parentheses. Okay? So here's the information. A, P, R, and T. I want you to decide which formula you use and make your substitutions. It is very important, guys. that you can make your substitutions. What about time? Time is always expressed in years, so make sure you make that adjustment and make your substitutions. You do have to have this formula memorized for your test tomorrow. Okay, so what formula do you use?
A equals P.
You have an A value. So you have to use A equals P times 1 plus RT. Okay? And now you're going to plug in your values. 1650 equals P times 1 plus the rate times the time. Wait, I thought time was 6 months. Why did I put 0.5?
You have to change it to a decimal.
It's got to be in years. 6 months is half of a year. All right, now on this parentheses, the easiest way to do that is just to plug it in your calculator. 1 plus 0.04 times 0.5. Okay, that gives you your decimal value of what? Decimal value of 1.02. And we're going to put the P after. Okay, that's just, just changing the order, which I totally can do. All right, now how do I solve for P?
Divide by 1.02.
Divide by 1.02. Is this a percentage?
No.
No. P stands for what in the interest formula? Principal, or the initial amount that you invested. This is not a percentage. Don't get it confused with your percent problems. This is not a percentage. All right, the last section on your test is compound interest. This is another formula that you must have memorized, and there are 2 questions on your test for compound interest. The directions will clearly state that it's compound interest. Okay? Your principal is $2,200, your rate is 7%, your time is 8 years. Plug these values into your formula and solve. Okay, so here's our formula. A equals P times 1 plus R to the power of T. The beautiful thing about this problem is that you can just plug everything into your calculator at one time. It's going to ask you on both problems, find the final balance. So P is 2,200 times 1 plus R, which is 0.07. Make sure you change it to a decimal, raised to the power of 8. And when you put that in your calculator, so do it with me, 2,200, parentheses, 1 plus, hang on one second, 0.07, raised to the power of 8, that's your answer, and you round it to the nearest penny, $3,780.01. All right, if you understand that, that's everything you need to know for your test tomorrow.